We are live. Fantastic. So welcome back to another live stream. I've got YouTube on in the background and I've got Instagram here in front of me, and today's live stream is going to be really simple. I'm going to give a quick market update as to where I see our current macro and microeconomics, what it means for the property market and some of the trends that I've been seeing, and then fielding Q&A in terms of any questions that might be burning up in your mind. So as you can see on the screen here, this was a post from the 4th of November. Turning Point Redefine, which is one of the biggest property companies in South Africa, predicts strongest SA property market in 7 years. And the theme and sentiment in general across my presentation today is going to be that of optimism, cautious optimism, which is a nice change of flavor. If you've been watching these live streams, which I do, or these market updates, which I do every 2-3 months, you'll notice that I've been through several iterations of very negative feedback, state-owned entities at basic collapse. We've seen, our debt to GDP has not been good. Our GDP in general has been really bad. We had the state capture years, so there's been a lot of negative news around South Africa, and finally things seem to be at a turning point. That's not to say that all news will be positive news. Unfortunately, that's just not the case. We are still a developing market with a high risk sentiment, but there seems to be strong interest from foreign direct investment, especially with the formation of the government of national unity. Okay, so the big news that should be on everybody's mind is this gentleman over here, Mr. Orange Man himself, President-elect Donald Trump. I mean, let's just take a second to absorb that. It is quite hectic, and I'm sure that there is polarized views on whether this is good or bad news. Depends whether you're siding with the side of Democrats or Republicans. I don't want to get into a political debate. I just want to understand that, or I want us to understand that Trump brings a lot of volatility to the market, where the Democrats or Kamala Harris would bring a lot of stability. Now, volatility is not necessarily a bad thing, right? There's a lot more money to be made during volatile markets, which is why the capitalists, also known as Republicans most of the time, tend to be very happy that Trump is coming to power, because the market is going to do this. And you make money when markets have volatility. When a market is flat, there's no spread. When a market is doing this, there's spread, there's opportunity for profit. So I think my speculation is that what Donald Trump will bring is high tariffs on imports and a protectionist trade, because he is a Republican, so he is focused on America's interest, and because America is such a big player in the global economy, it's going to have an impact on all of us. We're all just cogs in a machine, and America is the biggest cog, so it's going to have the biggest impact. And it could shake up the global economy. This could lead to more expensive imports, higher inflation, potential slowdowns in global trade, and growth as countries react. So like I said, there's going to be this volatility. There's going to be higher inflation, higher growth prospects, making it a more uncertain landscape, but entertaining. I mean, let's be honest. Personally, I'd prefer to see a rant from Donald Trump than a rant from Joe Biden, who couldn't really keep a coherent string of words together, or Kamala Harris, who's just laughing and saying irrelevant nonsense most of the time. So that's big news. I know this might sound strange, South Africans, why are we talking about Donald Trump? But again, we have to understand that economics is intertwined. You know, we can't just be worried about what's happening in South African politics. We have to understand what the global macroeconomic picture looks like. And what Donald Trump brings as well, which I think is fantastic, is that global leaders are scared of him. So the likes of Putin is probably not going to be as aggressive in terms of expanding their war into the Ukraine, which could be massive. And that whole Israel-Palestine war, you know, he might actually bring a little bit of stability from that front, whereas more volatility from an economic front. What we've seen with the Rand was doing really well up until early parts of October. As you can see here, we were at, it was close to 15 or 16 Rand to the dollar, which is the best we've had in a number of years. And that's because of the formation of the government of national unity. International investors saw this as a very strong move for governance and accountability, and thus a lot of FDI, foreign direct investment, flowed into the country, giving us a lot of economic boost, which is fantastic. But now with the news of the dollar and of Trump, we've gone back to what's at 17.9 to the dollar. I do think that the rand is going to push back, but obviously there is some volatility. And then we have Investec, one of our main banks in South Africa, and this is their opinion. So they state that South Africa's economic outlook shows cautious optimism, as household consumption is expected to rise, with pension fund withdrawals through the two-pot retirement system boosting disposable income. But that disposable income that people are now experiencing in their households are going towards debt reduction. People are paying off their debt as opposed to spending. And remember, economic growth comes when more people spend. Now, if people are not spending, they're not buying, they're not growing the economy, they're rather funding their debt obligations, then GDP is not really going to grow. And without GDP growing, none of us get wealthier, because the more that GDP grows, the bigger the pot of wealth that we can all tap into in South Africa. The smaller that growth is, the smaller our wealth grows. But it seems like GDP growth for 2024 is going to look at about a 1% with a 1.9% in 2027. So definitely improvement, cautious optimism. That's going to be the theme of today's call. And a lot of that has to do with load shedding reduction. Load shedding has probably eaten 2% of our GDP. That's what some economists estimate, which is just crazy. That level of impact, that plus the Zupta years of state capture just completely killed this economy for like 10, 15 years. Very sad. And the saddest part is that the most vulnerable in our society were the most impacted. What else Investec says is that the rand remains volatile due to shifting global market dynamics. Thank you, Trump. And we'll have to see what the Fed's actions are in terms of reducing interest rates or rising interest rates. Okay, so over to the Reserve Bank, which is our central bank that defines monetary policy, and they're essentially the people that are involved in either raising or reducing interest rates. And their expectation is 1.1% growth in GDP for 2024. And they've attributed this slow growth to economic global factors influencing inflation. So again, thanks, Trump. But cautious optimism is coming from the Reserve Bank. I think this next slide is great. This is showing our annual inflation rate from October of last year up until now. You can see that in October of last year we were at 5.9%. That was the rate at which things were getting more expensive, which is what inflation is. Then we had some nice reduction to December. Then we went back to a peak in February of 5.6. And remember, when inflation goes up, what else goes up? Interest rates. That's what the Reserve Bank does to be able to counter inflation, is they make debt more expensive to cool the economy. And they can reduce interest rates to stimulate the economy when inflation has cooled. And inflation, the last print in September was 3.8%. That is fantastic. And a very strong indicator that in 2 or 3 days' time, when the Monetary Policy Committee, the Reserve Bank, meets, we're likely to see another reduction in interest rates. And this is not a surprise and shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. And this is going to have massive knock-on effects to the property market. This is going to mean that there's less distressed sellers in the market because less people are going to have that financial burden of high interest rates. It's going to bring more buyers and more activity into the market, meaning this buyer's market that we've been in, where it's been a really good time to be a buyer, is slowly going to start turning into potentially a seller's market. We're not there yet. We're at the end of the buyer's market, in my opinion, and I think over the next 6 to 12 months, it's still a very good time to be an investor. But after that, I think getting these disgustingly low discounts that I've been getting in the last 3-4 years since COVID is probably not going to be as easy. The one big red flag in our country, and this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, is a very high unemployment rate. You can see that our unemployment rate is sitting at 33.9%. That was of April this year, so I think it has improved slightly. Discouraged work seekers, those are people who have tried to find work, and now are discouraged and tired and say there's no jobs out there, has increased by 160,000 people. That's very sad. That's people who want to work, are capable of working, are trying to find work and can't. Very sad. I actually have a quick story to tell here. couple days ago I was driving to Stellenbosch to go and pick up cake. Me and my lady are getting married, and we're doing cake tasting, and and on the way there was a guy on the road, and he was hitchhiking. And usually I don't pick up hitchhikers. I think as South Africans we're conditioned to believe that it's too risky, and like, what if the guy's got a knife or whatever. But this guy was an older man. He was 65, and he was in a suit, so it looked like he was going to an interview or coming back, and something just told me, like, stop, give this guy a ride. So I picked him up, and as we're driving to Stellenbosch, I asked him, what are you doing here? What's your story? All of that kind of stuff. And, he's a man from KZN, and he just got a job at Airports Company South Africa. And his job started in 2 weeks, mid of November. And he needed a place to stay in Western Cape until his job starts. So I'm like, okay, this all sounds good, but why are you going to Stellenbosch? And he's like, no, I'm trying to hitchhike my way to Mossel Bay, and the police told me that going to Stellenbosch will give me a good chance. I can stay at the garage there and hopefully get a trip. And I was like, why are you going to Mossel Bay? That's like a 6-7 hour trip. And he said no, he's got a friend that used to live there. He's not sure if that guy still lives there, but that guy owes him a little bit of money, and if he can go there and get the 300 rand that this person owes him, he's got that 300 rand can keep him and his wife going in terms of rent and food up until the 15th, when he starts his job and starts working. And I was like, it actually broke my heart, man. He's like a 60-year-old man, quite overweight, not in the best of health, should be on his retirement golden years, sitting back and relaxing and letting his grandkids come and spend time with him. But instead he's standing for 2-3 hours on a highway trying to get a trip to Stellenbosch, where he's going to hitchhike probably for 10-15 hours to get to Mossel Bay, to go and find a friend that he hopes still lives there. He's got no phone, he's got no resources. He's just going to go and rock up at this person's house to raise 300 rand so that he can hitchhike his way back to Western Cape before the 15th, before his job starts. Otherwise he loses his job. And I was just like, I think it's obvious when you're a South African to see the level of poverty that people are experiencing, but that one really made it real for me. And I ended up giving that guy 500 rand and dropping him off at home. And the level of gratitude that he had for me was insane. And I'm not saying this as like a look at me, I helped somebody's life. I mean, 500 rand is relative for me. It's not a lot of money, and for him it was life changing. I'm more trying to tell you how desperate people are, and how a small contribution for you could be a life changing contribution to somebody else. So, if you do have an employment or opportunity for somebody, I'm not a big fan of giving people money. I don't think that solves the problem, but giving somebody employment or an opportunity to work for their money, and there's a lot of people that are out there that are skilled, that are just desperate for an opportunity. So, yeah. Okay, let's move over to some of the property trends that we're seeing. The first one is inflation data. As you can see, Limpopo went down. Western Cape's still a strong performer, 4.42% was the latest print. Northwest is doing well. Gauteng is flat, has been flat since pre-COVID. I don't see any real growth in the Gauteng market. So your big players in the latest print is Northwest and Western Cape. Western Cape will always be a high performer, I think, because it's tracking international markets. Another trend is the semigration trend. I don't think this one is as high as it used to be in previous years. You can see that 2021 and 2022 there was a net change of 18 and 19,000 people respectively, and not surprisingly Western Cape is the highest performer. Most people are still semigrating to the Western Cape because, well, it is well run as a city and the lifestyle is fantastic. Obviously Western Cape has its flaws. It works for your affluent sector, it doesn't work for your lower income sector, but neither does Gauteng. No province in South Africa works for your poor person. I think the argument in Western Cape is at least it works for your affluent person, and that's why there's such a big trend. Gauteng is still a strong performer, so it's still your second biggest one, and then KZN, so I don't think there's any surprises there. South Africa's property landscape reflects a steady migration from rural areas to regions surrounding urban centers, and this is for lifestyle and economic opportunity. So Western Cape, Limpopo, Gauteng have seen the highest population growth adjacent to cities, with smaller municipalities experiencing significant increases in property registration. So here on the left hand side you can see the different provinces, and then you can see the populations between 2023 and 2013, and then the change in growth. So Gauteng went from, in 2013, from an urban perspective, 12.5 million to 14.5 million, so a growth of 16%. The Western Cape went from 5.5 million to 6.5 million, which is a 22% increase. And then you've got Mpumalanga, which went from 1.8 million to 2.1, which represents a 19%. So there's a clear trend from people living in South African rural areas towards the cities because they want lifestyles and economic opportunities. This is putting a significant strain on the cities. So you can see in the likes of Johannesburg, where the water crisis is becoming increasingly a bigger problem. And yesterday I heard on the news that the water minister said, this is mainly because the city is growing. And I'm like, no, it's mainly because of corruption and lack of effective usage of your budget towards infrastructure. Like 35% of South Africa's water is lost to leakage. Man, it irritates me when the government doesn't take accountability for their shit. Okay, South Africa's residential property shows resilience, with a slight increase in first-time buyers and a decrease in negative sales, suggesting stability after the challenges of post-COVID. So our total market value of the South African property economy, do you want to guess what that number is? 7 trillion. That's crazy, eh? And you can see that the top performer is the 0 to 250k mark, which is my market, and that's the market that I keep pushing and telling people to get into. That's seeing some serious growth in 2024. I'd like to think that I'm a bit of a contributor to that. And then our next biggest one is the 1.5 million to 3 million rand mark. Okay. Now this slide shows you the comparison between first-time buyers versus repeat buyers. So blue, you see the first-time buyers, yellow, you see the repeat buyers. We've seen a decline in 2023, but we've seen a steady increase in repeat buyers, which is not surprising for me. And we've seen a slight increase in first-time buyers, but in 2023 we saw a bit of a decline. And then this is a really nice graph. It shows you the transformation of our property sector over 15 years. Fewer young and first-time buyers are entering the market, and this is likely due to economic pressures and lifestyle requirements. Trends include a growing demand for estates and sectional titles, and an increase in semigration to the Western Cape as people seek lifestyle and remote work opportunities. And here you can see property volume and values from 2009 to 2023. So we can see that the average value in 2009 was sitting at the 240k mark. In 2023 it's about 260. Capital growth is not South Africa's strength, okay, barring the Western Cape. The Western Cape is obviously an anomaly because it tracks the international market, but South Africa as a whole is not seeing great growth, which is why I'm an advocate for yield. If you're getting good rental yield, you're making your money monthly. You don't care if the property goes up in value or not, you're still making your profit. And if the property value goes up, extra gravy on your sauce. But if it doesn't, at least you're still profitable. Now, not all good news is coming out of South Africa. There are some alarm bells for property owners that we have to be aware of. And the one thing that is serious is inflation. So property owners in South Africa are facing financial strain as property rates, taxes, water and electricity tariffs have risen significantly faster than inflation, with discrepancies in property valuations exacerbating the burden. So basically what's happening is that inflation is, as you can see there, 372% since 1996. Our water bill has increased 2,100%. So inflation's gone up by 370, water's gone up by 2,100%, and electricity's gone up by 1,700. So thank you, ANC and state capture. You can see that from 2009, when Zuma took the reins, to basically, well, nothing's changed since Ramaphosa's taken over, because he's he's got big talk, no bite. And yeah, we're seeing massive growth in water and electricity costs, which does put a burden, not really on property owners. Some property owners, it depends how you've structured your portfolio. So for me, what I do is I charge a base rent to my tenants, and then on top of that I charge utilities. So if a tenant wants to excessively use water or electricity, it's on their bill because it's through a prepaid system. Some solid financial advice which I share on every single one of these calls is that you must have diversification. So some money needs to be in property, some money needs to be in stocks, some needs to be in commodities and gold. Make sure that you educate yourself and that you allocate your assets appropriately, that it fits your risk and return appetite. Before I get into some of the questions, I just want to highlight that I do have a coaching and mentorship program. The picture that you're seeing here is my latest student. His name is Robert van Wyk, and he bought a block of 9 flats. Forget this, 2 million rand. 9 2-bedroom flats in a decent area for 2.1 million rand, generating over 45,000 in monthly revenue. His internal rate of return is 21.35% with an MPV of 4.3 million, and he's got 0 of his own money in the deal. He has got bank finance through and through, and the property washes its own face, i.e. he doesn't have to fund a shortfall. He is from PE. He is now a full-time, well, not a full-time, but he's an investor in Joburg, and he joined my coaching program, and I held his hand through the process. So if you are looking to get into this low income segment, you're keen, you've got appetite, you don't want to take too many risks, and you don't want to make too many mistakes, consider fast tracking your portfolio and joining my coaching program. What I can teach you and what I will teach you is how to do area research, so to look at the potential gross yield and the risk profile and marry the two. I'll help you with deal analysis. I'll vet all the deals that you're looking at. I'll help you with the negotiation process, how to get up to 30% discount on asking price. I'll help you with the due diligence, so subject to proof of income, proof of expense, proof of condition. I can give you access to great, highly qualified inspectors who can go and understand the structural integrity of the building and any conditions, and give you, a very comprehensive renovation report. I can help you with bank finance, with private finance, and I can help you with transfer and management, and I can help you ensure that this property, although in a higher risk area, performs well. I've got over 12 years of experience in this market and a very well established team that has got a great track record. So if you are interested in getting into the property game next year, but you want to do so safely, you want to fast track your success with minimal risk, consider joining my coaching program, and just hit me up on DM or send me a message and I'll send you more details. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you want access to this highly exclusive content like these market updates, hit me up on my membership on my YouTube channel. Okay, let me get through to some questions. I'm going to start here. Okay, awesome to catch you while you're awake. Awesome. If you have questions, guys, now's the time. Please pop it in the comments or in the chat. I'm going to filter between the YouTube questions as well as the Instagram. Hey bro, is there any way you could show us examples of what to look for in new developments? Okay, so I do a lot of this kind of content specifically on Instagram and on TikTok regarding new builds. New builds are not a good investment in my opinion. And remember, you have to understand the context that I come from. I come from a context where cash flow is king. That is what I'm interested in. New builds don't offer that, and the reason is because you're paying a premium price because developers need to make their profits. Oh my word, I've been talking to the wrong bloody camera. Can you believe it? That's so embarrassing. Yeah, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've literally been speaking to the wrong camera the whole time. Sorry about that, people on YouTube. I promise to get better. So the new build strategy just does not make sense in my opinion. You're paying a premium price because the developer has baked in margin to make sure that they're profitable. So going for your new build strategy doesn't make sense because you're going to be financing the shortfall. And by financing the shortfall, what happens to your salary? it gets reduced. So at some point you're going to hit a ceiling. You're going to do 2, 3, 4, 5 transactions, and now your full salary and disposable income is going to go towards financing somebody else's lifestyle, and thus you can't access more debt and you can't scale beyond the 3, 4, 5 properties. So Raul, I say avoid new builds. Once you have a portfolio of low-income housing that's generating a big profit and you want to reduce your tax burden, then buy 5 new builds and take advantage of the Section 13 Sex Act. Different story. Then new builds are fantastic. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. Audio and visual is good. I'm glad to hear it, my man. Any other questions? Let's see. Oh man, my sausage fingers are getting in the way. The more debt paid, the more we're going to spend. Yes. So yeah, the problem if, remember, an economy works like this. The more that people spend, somebody's spend becomes somebody else's salary. If I go to the shops, if I go to a restaurant and I tip the waiter, buy food and I pay the waiter, my spending equals that waiter's income. Now, if I don't spend, if I decide to be frugal and I don't go out and I don't go to the restaurant, without me spending, that waiter doesn't get an income. So reducing spend, my reduction in spend reduces the economy. And the economy is just a sum of all transactions that have happened. So the more people spend, the bigger the economy becomes. So if we have better disposable income in households and people aren't spending it on debt, which is not really a good use of money for the economy, we're not going to see much growth. But once debt becomes more manageable and realistic in terms of interest rates coming down, then we're good. Okay, Chad, unfortunately you only get capital growth in Cape Town unless you strike the pin in the haystack. What do you suggest in Cape Town market? So yes, Cape Town has got the best opportunity for growth, for capital growth, but it's also got the worst opportunity for rental yield, because those two are contradictory concepts, right? If you've got capital growth like you see in Cape Town, you're seeing massive growth in the property value, but you're not seeing equivalent growth in rental, meaning the difference between the purchase price and the rental keeps getting bigger, meaning it's harder and harder to get good rental yield. So Cape Town is a good capital growth market, where the rest of South Africa, well, your lower income segment in Johannesburg is much stronger for rental yield. In terms of how you can kind of guarantee good growth is by buying correctly. So by buying cheap, by buying well below market value, you take all the risk off the table. And the only way you do that is by finding distressed sellers or distressed properties, which is hard to do, you know. I'm going to change my video again because I can see that there's a bit of lag. Just give me a sec here. Okay, so in terms of the Cape Town market, what do I suggest? I suggest only invest in Cape Town when you've got a portfolio of cash flow positive properties. And then I'd probably say go and try the Airbnb strategy. At least you'll get decent enough yield that you could probably cover your obligations, and then you'll get your capital growth rate, and you'll make your money in a 10-15 year time period. What rates are exciting you at the moment in terms of investing? Benjamin, to be honest, rates are, in my opinion, and my opinion is humble and potentially uninformed, rates suck. When I look at the rate market, I'm seeing yields of 10, 8, 10, 12%. I'd rather put my money into the bank, into a fixed deposit, or I'd put my money into the S&P 500, which is tracking a much better growth trajectory than the rate market. So personally, I don't invest in any rates. I think I'm getting a 20% plus yield when I look at property, and if I'm not going to get those kind of yields from a rate, I'm not going to invest in it. So I've got probably 30% of my allocation, my investment allocation is towards stocks, and I buy tech stocks in the US and index funds, and then the rest of the allocation is towards property, and I buy bricks and mortar because the return profile is much higher. What rental property expenses that gets investors off guard? Miles, that's a good question. The expenses that are involved in property are levies, rates and taxes, insurance, water, electricity, utilities. The ones that probably get people off guard are the ones that aren't as obvious to see, which is provisions. Provision for bad debts or for vacancies, provision for management fee, provision for maintenance. People think that the property is never going to need to be fixed up, or that the property is going to be fully let all year round. That's just unrealistic. And then income tax. If you're running a profitable business, you're going to be paying income tax, and people don't often add that into their numbers. So whatever happens in the other countries affects our country's inflation. Yeah. Our country is part of a global economy, so whatever happens to other countries. Look at what happened between the war between Russia and Ukraine. Russia is a big oil producer, Ukraine is a big food producer. What happened to food and fuel when the war kicked off? It went through the roof because supply was not as high and demand didn't change. We still needed all the food that we needed before the war, and we needed all the fuel that we needed before the war. But because the war came in, supply was interrupted. There was a massive supply constraint because in the channel where the boats travel and bring stuff from China to South Africa was affected for months, and that infected inflation. So no, of course, we're just a cog in a very big machine in a global economy, and what happens in the US affects us. Any other questions? I'm just scrolling through here to see what's next. What are the property expenses that gets people off guard? Miles, I think I already answered that. I see you watching off both. Can you explain it? You're going to have to be a bit more specific. I've spoken a lot today, so I don't know what you're referring to exactly. Same product, different flavor. I assume you're talking about new builds, but yes, all new builds are the same product, different providers. So people often send me, they'll send me the iGrow model, and then they'll send me another one, and they're like, which one's the best? I'm like, they're all terrible. They're all really bad. New builds are a bad product. Benjamin, I'm a student at UCT about to start my honors in BSc Property Studies. What would you say is an effective way to enter the market as a young age? So Benjamin, the best way, so before I give my opinion, remember that my opinion is tainted, okay? Anybody who asks me what I think a good property investment is, I'm always going to say the same thing. Affordable housing in Johannesburg. Because I don't really believe in the capital appreciation strategy. I don't really believe in Airbnb. I'm not a big fan of student housing. So take what I'm about to say with a pinch of salt. But Benjamin, if you are a new young person wanting to start in the market, I would say go and explore the affordable housing sector in Johannesburg. So that basically means go and buy a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom apartment under the 500,000 Rand mark. You can go to high risk areas like Hillbrow and Joburg CBD, or you can go to lower to medium income areas like Alberton, Germiston, etc. I would recommend that you get a coach, you do some training, you get some experience, or you get somebody with experience to help you along. I wouldn't say you must just jump in cold feet. That's why a coach is such a valuable investment, because that's somebody who can give you not only the team but the local knowledge, so you can avoid a lot of the risks. But if you're a young person, you might as well go out there and make your own mistakes. Well, I was looking at property, I'm convinced now. Oh, wait, amazing. I'm glad. I'm a college student, and I see where people I love are sleeping on the property market, specifically commentation market. I want to get into it. What would you suggest? I don't know what the commentation market is, but as I mentioned here to Benjamin, start at that affordable housing sector. Go for a 2-3 bedroom apartment in Joburg. Get your hands and feet wet in that affordable housing sector. Remember that business is supply and demand. Okay, if you want to have a successful shoe business, right? You want to sell Nike. You want to be in an area where Nike is in high demand. So you want to be in a student town where there's a whole bunch of basketball players and they want to be buying Nike shoes. That's a clever model. Now in South Africa, we have a very clear economic layout. We have a very poor country. That's just, that's based on a lot of factors, historical factors, etc. So to go and buy now in the affluent sectors, to go and buy in Sea Point and Greenpoint and all of these like beautiful fancy places, that's a great idea, but you're servicing maybe 1% of the market. There's 1% of South Africans that can afford living there. For me, it's not a good business model. And a much better business model is to go into Joburg CBD, the economic hub of this country, and go and find a good block of flats that has got a good body corporate. Go and buy a property there below market value, zhuzh it up with some nice renovations, place a good quality tenant that you've vetted, and let that thing pay you every single month, enhancing your affordability, and then you do the next one and the next one, and you scale until you have 100 units. That's my opinion. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. You're welcome, Benjamin. Okay, I'll take a couple more questions. So if you've got something, let me know. Have you ever heard of the Section 8 property program in America? If you do, I don't know what it is. I don't follow American property. It's not relevant for me. But no, there's very different legislation in America than there is here. Is Cape Town property market in a bubble? If you believe that the international property market is in a bubble, then yes, potentially. But Cape Town is tracking international rates. So whatever's happening in New York and London in terms of capital growth, that's what's happening in Cape Town. Because Cape Town is not a South African city. I would be surprised if even 50% of the people living in Cape Town city are South African. Because most South Africans can't afford it. It's crazy expensive. I would consider myself in the affluent sector of South Africans, and I don't live in the city. I live on the outskirts of the city because living in the city is just unaffordable. So the people living in South Africa are your digital nomads, your Americans, your Germans, your Europeans who use their enhanced buying power to come buy a lifestyle here that they could never afford in their hometowns. But yeah, I mean, I think Cape Town's an interesting one. I thought it was a bubble for many years, and it just keeps growing and growing. Miles, what is property manager's job? What's the typical percentage they take for student accommodation? I also want to join your mentorship as I'm looking for cash flow strategy, not return. Awesome, Miles. Well, if you do want to know more about my program, just send me a comment, hit me up on DM on Instagram or whatever, and I'll send you more information. What do property managers do? They manage the property, right? So they do ingoing and outgoing inspections. They market the unit. They vet the tenants. They do evictions. They collect rent. They can pay your utilities and your COJ or your rates account on your behalf. So they do all the operational local stuff, right? So I'm based out in Cape Town. I live here. My managing agent makes sure that I can live here but still have a profitable business by running the operations of my business. What do they take? It depends on the strategy. So for student housing, they're probably going to take 10 to 15% of the rent they collect. Student accommodation is quite a high management strategy, which is why they'll probably take a premium cost like 15%. In the future, are you going to borrow from the bank or private lenders once interest rates go down? Yeah, not in the future. I've been taking money from the bank and private investors for years, and I will continue doing that because this is the secret, guys. I know this sounds crazy, and some of you are going to be like, "No, Lawrence, you're talking absolute shit." The secret to wealth is debt. But there's a caveat. The secret to wealth is good debt. Now, good debt is when you use other people's money, the bank's money or private money, to buy income generating assets. If I didn't use debt, I wouldn't have the portfolio that I have now. And I have close to 200 units of properties. If I weren't to use the bank's money and just use my own cash that I saved up, I'd probably have maybe 1 or 2 properties. So, debt is the secret to financial freedom. The problem is that most people think of debt as bad. And yes, debt can be bad. When you use your credit card to buy luxury and lifestyle liabilities, debt is horrible and it's going to kill your financial freedom. But when used correctly, debt is what creates financial freedom. And debt has given me financial freedom. So yeah, I will continue using debt as much as possible. Okay, I'm going to do 1 or 2 more questions, so I'm waiting for you guys to stimulate me. Come on, give me a hard question. Ask me the hardest economic or property question that you have in mind. Let's see if I if I know my stuff. And while I'm waiting for that question to arise, let me just tell you a little bit more about my coaching program. So in terms of my coaching program, what you get is one-on-one dedicated sessions with me. So these sessions will be conducted over Zoom, and we'll meet once a month. I will give you homework assignments and give you assessments to do. You go out into the market, apply the knowledge that I've taught you, and once you finish that homework assignment, you come back to me. In between those sessions, you do have my number for WhatsApp and email support. In terms of how the sessions are run, session 1, we do strategy, so we figure out what you're trying to achieve, your goals and your financial freedom number. The second session, we look at area research, so we look at gross yield to shortlist areas that could be potentials for cash flow, and then we look at the risk assessment. So what is the risk profile based on affordability, employment, education levels, and good standing ratios within the area. The third session, we look at deal analysis. So we analyze cash flows, internal rate of return, return on investment. You go out into the market and look at 30, 40, 50 properties, and you bring me back the top 5 that you have, and I run those numbers with you, ensuring that you haven't misprovisioned anything or that you haven't inflated any numbers, because sometimes, when we're emotionally bought in and excited, we tend to fudge the numbers to try and improve our chances of getting a deal. Then the next session, we look at setting up your structure, so getting a trust, getting a PTY, what the pros and cons are of each. You obviously get access to my accountant who can set all of that up for you if it's the right decision, but we have to go through that debate to see what your situation is. Then we move to the next session, which is all about OTPs, signing an offer to purchase with suspensive conditions to protect your interests. We then move to the next stage, which is raising finance. That personally is my favorite part of the business. I love getting the bank's money, and I love even more getting private money to be able to scale. And raising finance is probably one of the biggest skills that you'll need to grow your little property empire. And then we go towards transfer, what to expect and what checklist to go through to prepare for that transfer window. Then we have management, how to deal with ingoing and outgoing inspections, how to vet your tenant, how to deal with evictions, how to do maintenance. And then after that, we just focus on scale and continuing to grow your portfolio. Murray Lee, what is a good strategy to keep your property business tax low? And would you say owning multiple properties in a business name is more beneficial than your property business? Okay, so there's 2 questions there. Question number 1 is how to reduce your tax. Okay. So I think there's a slight mindset shift that's needed here, right? You only get taxed if you have a profitable business. So the best way to reduce your tax is to not have a profitable business, which is not a very good thing. So like for me, if you shouldn't be thinking about tax avoidance. When you've got a massive company and you're super profitable, yes, tax avoidance or not avoidance, efficiencies is important. But in the beginning, you want to be paying tax because that's an indication that you're profitable. Now, if you do want to reduce your tax, the best way to do that is to raise more debt, because debt is tax free. Well, not tax free, but when you get debt, you've got that monthly bond repayment. That monthly bond repayment is split into 2 payments. You've got your capital portion and your interest portion. That interest portion, especially in the first few years of your debt, is the significant amount of that bond repayment. That's tax deductible. So if I'm making, let's say, 10 grand in rental income, and I've got 2,000 of operating expenses, okay, so I'm making net profit of 8,000. I'm getting taxed on 8,000 worth of net profit. But then I go to the bank, I refinance the property, I get debt on that property, and I bring in an interest expense of 8,000 rand per month. Now my net profit goes from 8,000 to 0 because I've now deducted from my net profit my interest expense. I don't pay any more tax. And I've released money from the bank, which I can now use to go and scale and buy more properties. Miles, I'll have to purchase. Oh, and then your second question, would you say owning multiple properties in your business name is more beneficial for your property business? Yeah, I mean, I use multiple properties to segregate and segment risk. So when I bring on new partners and I need to have clean shareholding, I create a new PTY. But if it wasn't for that, you could put all your properties into one business. But then obviously all your risk is exposed in one entity. So the reason why you would have multiple PTYs or businesses is to be able to segregate risk. I'll have to purchase in cash. I don't have a job, hence I'm looking for a cash flow strategy. This way I'll be able to get finance in the future. My allocation is 1.5 in cash. So 1.5 million miles is sufficient to buy a block of flats. It's a little bit on the light side. I would have liked it to be 2 to 2.5 million. That's more what you'd need to do a cash purchase, but 1.5 we can work with. So I think the best thing that you can do is send me a DM, and I'll send you a link, and you can book a quick intro call with me. Let's talk about your situation, your goals, and how I could potentially assist. But yes, with 1.5 we could buy a small block of flats, making, call it 30 grand in gross revenue. The cost of your coaching. So Chad, I've got 3 programs, a 6, 12 and 24 month program, depending what you're trying to achieve. The 6 month program is if you want to buy 1 or 2 single lets. The 12 month is if you want to buy a small multi-let, so like a student house or a small block of flats. And the 24 month, which is what Rob bought, is a mentorship program. That's a 2-year program of unlimited support, and I fly down to Johannesburg with you and I help you handpick your deal. So we go and do viewings together, and I also offer you off-market deals through my network. The 6 month program is 45,000, the 12 month is 80,000, and then the 2 year is 150. Those are 2024 prices. Next year the prices will likely go up. It depends on how much time I can allocate towards this. I obviously have my own business to run, and I can only allocate so much time to coaching. So I know it's expensive, but I mean, I hope that after listening to me for the last 45 minutes, you can see that I'm a legit player. I know what I'm talking about. I offer a lot of value for free to people through my YouTube and my social media. I give so much more to those who pay me. Thank you for giving such good information and shedding light on this matter. You're welcome, Marilee. Let's see if there's any last few questions here. Mitch, I will respond to your DM a little bit later. Do you what communicate is about and is the same as purchasing in Joburg? I don't understand your question, Mitch. You'll just need to reword that, please, man. Airbnb or permanent, sorry, I missed it now. Airbnb or permanent residence, if the area is suitable for both. Airbnb is seasonal, so it's a lot more work. You'll have some months that do well, some months that do badly. So from cash flow management perspective, it's harder. I prefer permanent residence. I want to put in a family into a property that's going to stay there for the next 10 years. I don't want to deal with weekend incomers and goers and then I have to do cleaning and then no, that's not for me. I'm not interested in that. Why don't you like student housing when you make... Are we back? Can you hear me? Testing. I'm not sure what happened there. Okay, we are back. Sorry about that. My Wi-Fi tripped. I do think that I was pretty much at the end of my presentation, but if there is still 1 or 2 questions, let me know. The last question that I had on the Instagram is, what are my future ambitions? And that's a great question. And a question I love answering because I love thinking into the future. And you know, as you go through life, and I'm sure my older people on the call will understand that your values and your goals, your ambitions, and all of that stuff changes as you change, as you get older. And you know, when I was 20 nothing years old, 10, 12 years ago, my only goal was to become financially free. And I thought it would solve all my problems, and the reality is it didn't. You know, I'm financially free now, and I've got just as many problems and stresses and worries in life as I had before. I probably have more pressure and more stress in my life now because of the pressure I put on myself. But anyway, that's for us to discuss over a brandy or a Coke or a coffee one day if we ever do get to meet in person. My main goal is to try and be a really positive influence on the property landscape in South Africa, and I would love to list on the JSE Stock Exchange so that I can access a large amount of capital, and then I can distribute that capital into affordable, good quality housing in the township market. I would love to be a person that's involved in eradicating the township lifestyle. I think that we're far along enough as a country to ensure that everybody has dignity in living conditions. So I guess that's sort of my goal. Hopefully I'll be able to see still within my lifetime the end of indignified housing in South Africa, but that's an ambitious goal. Miles, I've been sourcing land deals for home developers. It's not easy, but there's a lot of cash in it. My biggest assignment deal was 58,000 I'm just inspired by your work. 200 rentals is inspirational. And Miles, that's awesome, man. I love your hustle, and like I said, if you've got 1.5, we can work with that. Hit me up on DM. I'd love to be your coach. I'd love to hold your hand through the process and help you, allocate that money that you've worked hard for into a passive source of income. And Juan and Connie, you are welcome for the insights, and thanks for joining. Thanks to everybody that's been on. I can see that there's been great questions asked, and hopefully my little rant today gave you a little bit of value and gave you a bit of reassurance that you are on the right track. Financial freedom is achievable. You probably couldn't have convinced me 10, 12 years ago that I'd ever be financially free, but I'm here as hopefully a bit of an inspiration that it is possible. I'm just a normal dude. I think the main reason why I'm financially free, here's the secret, is that I have a very low lifestyle cost. I'm a simple man with a very simple life. I don't have a nice fancy car. I don't live in a fancy house. I don't try and impress people with my money by spending it. Instead, I live a frugal lifestyle. I invest in income generating assets. I've invested in my mind and my knowledge a lot. I've gotten lots of coaches, read lots of books, and I've just focused on compound interest. And that's something that everybody on this call and everybody in South Africa can achieve as well. That's the beautiful thing about compound interest, is that it might seem like the grass is growing really slowly in the first year, 5 years, maybe even the first 10 years, but after that, with compound growth, you can see some serious upside. So Miles, I look forward to hearing from you, and thanks everybody for being on the call. Welcome to Mario, who is a member on my channel. If you do want access to these market updates, they are going to be exclusive for members going forward. So if you do want some exclusive content, consider joining my membership. All the money that I make through membership gets reinvested into content creation. It's not a profitable business. It's just something I try and do to buy nicer equipment, get more lighting, get more audio. This cool little microphone that hopefully has increased your experience is from the revenue that I've generated. So if you do want to support my business in any way that you can, I would appreciate it. Until next time, happy investing.